The camera didn't lie. David stood frozen in front of the wide TV screen in his study, the glow from the security footage painting his face pale. His eyes were glued to what looked like a hidden corner of their compound, right near the backyard where the generator sat behind tall flower pots. It was late, around 11 p.m., but he hadn't slept a wink. There, in black and white, under the motion-triggered camera he installed just days ago, was his wife, Linda. She was leaning into someone, whispering. The other person was younger, much smaller, and dressed in the blue overalls of their gateman, Toby. 16-year-old Toby. David's lips parted as he leaned closer, struggling to believe what he was seeing. The image showed Linda brushing her fingers across Toby's cheek, then cupping his chin gently. Toby looked nervous, but not surprised. Then Linda kissed him, long, soft, on the lips. David's heart broke right there. He didn't even know whether to scream or collapse. He'd taken in Toby after his father died from malaria in the village. Toby was his late brother's son, his own nephew. He was supposed to help clean, open the gate, water the flowers. Now the boy was sleeping with his aunt, his wife. David stumbled backward, his foot catching the edge of the rug. The chair behind him crashed to the ground. He blinked hard, thinking maybe he was just tired. But when he pressed rewind, it happened again. And again. Linda kissed the boy 3 times in less than 5 minutes. Then she gave him a brown envelope. Toby counted the money and stuffed it in his pocket. David didn't sleep that night, and by morning he wasn't the same man anymore. 2 weeks earlier, nothing seemed out of the ordinary in the house. David was a respected civil engineer based in Birmingham, England, but he had recently returned home to Nigeria to oversee a government project in Abuja. He had brought his family to settle back in for a while. They lived in a comfortable duplex in the heart of Gorimpa. Linda, his wife of 10 years, handled the home affairs while he focused on construction deadlines and client meetings. They had 1 child together, a daughter named Miracle, 8 years old and full of joy. Toby, the young gateman, had been with them for 2 years. He was obedient, quiet, and always stayed out of trouble. David trusted him. But over the last month, something had changed in Linda. She became more irritable. She picked fights over small things, often spent long hours outside buying things, and came home with perfume she didn't wear before. David had noticed it. He had asked gently a few times, "Is everything okay?" Linda always responded, "Just stress. You're never home. I'm lonely." So David decided to surprise her. He shifted his meetings, cleared his schedule for a few days, and came home early that Friday afternoon. Linda wasn't around. Miracle said, "Mummy went to the salon," but her hair had already been done 2 days earlier. Out of curiosity and a gut feeling he couldn't shake, David decided to check the backyard camera. But there was none. That part of the house between the water tank and the generator had no coverage. So the next day he had a new camera installed secretly in the blind spot. It faced the wall where Toby often sat to rest during his shifts. He didn't expect to catch anything. He just wanted peace of mind. But what he found shattered his peace forever. On the night he saw the footage, David stayed quiet. His hands trembled, but his mind remained sharp. He downloaded the video to 3 separate flash drives. 1 for his lawyer, 1 for his pastor, 1 for his safe. He needed time to plan what to do. The next morning, he behaved like nothing had happened. He greeted Linda with a soft kiss on the forehead. She smiled, even served him breakfast with extra pepper soup. Her way of pretending things were normal. But David watched everything now. He noticed how Toby avoided eye contact. He noticed how Linda lingered near the gate longer than usual. He noticed that she didn't let Miracle near Toby anymore. By evening, he had made his decision. He would not confront them yet. Not until he had more evidence. If he acted too early, they could twist the truth. Linda was cunning, and Toby, young as he was, could easily say it was all a mistake. So David called a friend, a retired police officer, and asked to borrow a small voice recorder. That night, he slipped the recorder under the bench near the gate, where Linda usually chatted with Toby while watering flowers. Then he told his driver he'd be traveling for a 2-day conference in Kaduna. He packed a fake bag, kissed Miracle goodbye, and left the house, but only went as far as a friend's house down the road. From there, he watched the live camera feed on his phone. Sure enough, less than 3 hours after he left, Linda came out to the compound in a short robe, looking around nervously. She sat on the bench. 10 minutes later, Toby joined her. They talked. They laughed. Then she reached for his hand. Another kiss. Another envelope. Then the shocking part. "I'll make sure David leaves the country for good," Linda whispered. "Are you sure?" Toby asked nervously. "Yes, just keep quiet and do what I say. Don't talk to anyone, especially that girl. You know Miracle talks too much." David's heart pounded. She was planning something bigger. But what? The next morning, David returned home with a forced smile. "How was Kaduna?" Linda asked, yawning. "Stressful. You know Nigeria," he replied, setting down his bag. "Any wahala here?" She shook her head. Everything was fine. Toby managed. "I see." That night, David sat in the living room staring blankly at the news while Linda bathed upstairs. Miracle was asleep. Toby had gone to buy bread and milk. David reached into his pocket and pressed play on the voice recorder. Her voice played again, clearly. "I'll make sure David leaves the country for good." He paused the recording and gripped his chest. What did she mean by that? Was she planning to poison him? Frame him? Steal his assets? Everything he owned was under his name, but Linda had access to documents. She knew passwords. She had fingerprints stored on his phone and bank app. Suddenly, this wasn't just cheating. This was betrayal of the deepest kind. By Saturday morning, David's eyes were red from lack of sleep. He went to his lawyer's house with the video and audio. The lawyer, Mr. James Olatunde, watched everything without speaking. When the recording ended, he looked David in the eye and said, "You have a strong case. Very strong. But don't rush. The moment she finds out, she'll start hiding evidence. Let's build this carefully." David nodded slowly. "I want full custody of my daughter. I want Linda removed from my house. And I want Toby punished." The lawyer leaned back. "You'll get all three, but we need one more thing." "What?" "Catch them in the act. Live. That way, she can't deny anything." David agreed. They made a plan. That night, David returned home like normal. Smiled. Ate dinner. Took Miracle upstairs. Linda seemed relaxed, thinking her secrets were safe. Then, at exactly midnight, she whispered something into her phone and tiptoed downstairs. David followed, camera phone in hand. He peeked through the curtain and saw her unlocking the gate silently. Toby was already waiting. She reached for his hand. David pressed record. But just as he opened the door to confront them, Linda pulled Toby into the kitchen, and the light snapped off. Darkness. A scream followed. Then a crash. David ran. What would you do if the woman you loved betrayed you with someone you trusted like family? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. The scream tore through the night like a knife. David didn't hesitate. He shoved open the door and rushed toward the kitchen. The overhead light had been turned off, but a dim bulb above the sink flickered just enough for him to see shadows moving. Fast. Chaotic. There was the sound of glass shattering. A pot clanged to the floor. Then a loud thump, followed by silence. David froze at the entrance, breath held, phone clutched tightly in his hand, still recording. "Linda!" he shouted. No answer. "Toby!" Still nothing. He took one careful step inside, and then he saw them. Linda was kneeling over Toby's body. The boy lay on the tiled floor, motionless, a nasty cut above his eyebrow leaking blood onto the cold ceramic. David's chest seized. "What happened?" he barked, moving quickly to check the boy's pulse. Linda jerked up, startled, her eyes wide with terror. Her silk robe was half open, and her hand trembled as she pointed to a broken stool in the corner. He slipped," she stammered. "I didn't do anything. I swear." David stared at her in disbelief. Why was he even inside the kitchen at midnight? "What are you doing with a child behind my back?" I was just... "Don't lie to me, Linda. Not tonight." Toby groaned softly, eyes fluttering. He was alive but dazed. David took a shaky breath and pulled out his phone. He stopped recording. Then, without another word, he dialed the emergency number. 20 minutes later, an ambulance arrived with sirens flashing. The security men at the estate gate stared curiously as the paramedics wheeled Toby out on a stretcher. David followed behind, stone-faced. Linda tried to speak, to explain, but David didn't look at her once. By morning, the entire neighborhood had heard whispers. Something had happened in the Okafor household. And by afternoon, the gossip had turned into fuel. I heard Madam was caught with the boy. They say Olga has proof. Abomination. The hospital confirmed Toby had suffered a mild concussion. Nothing life-threatening. But while he rested in a private ward, David sat down with the police and played the audio recording, followed by the video footage. The officers exchanged shocked glances. "This is more serious than we thought," one of them muttered. David leaned forward. "She's manipulating him. She's grooming him. This is not just adultery. This is abuse. He's 16. You have the boy's birth certificate?" "Yes. I registered him myself." The lead officer nodded slowly. "We'll need to speak to the boy when he's well enough. And your wife?" "She's not my wife anymore," David replied coldly. "She's just the woman who betrayed me." Back at home, Linda was a shadow of herself. Her hands trembled constantly. She barely ate. She barely spoke. And for the first time since the marriage began, she was the one sleeping on the couch. Miracle sensed the tension but didn't understand it. "Daddy, why is Mummy not sleeping with us?" David just smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes adults make mistakes, but Daddy is here. I'll protect you." The next few days were quieter, but the silence was a storm waiting to burst. Linda tried multiple times to plead. She knocked on David's door late at night, sobbing. "Please, let me explain. I was lonely. You were always away. I didn't mean for it to go that far." David didn't open the door. Instead, he handed her a printed document the next morning. Divorce papers. Linda read the first line and gasped. "You're serious? I'm done." She broke into fresh tears, falling to her knees. "Don't do this, David. For the sake of Miracle. For the sake of everything we built." David stared at her, his voice calm but final. "You built nothing. You destroyed it the moment you touched that boy." She looked up at him, eyes bloodshot, breathing hard. Then her face changed, softened into something else. Something cold. "If I go down, I won't go alone," she whispered. David raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." That night, David met again with his lawyer and the police. "She might retaliate," the lawyer warned. "Women like her don't break easily. They hide things. They plan things." "I'm ready for whatever she tries," David replied. But deep down he wasn't, because Linda was already making moves. Unbeknownst to David, she had gone to her cousin's house earlier that day. A cousin who worked at a local family court. A cousin who had helped her once sign certain real estate documents during the house construction years ago. Documents that could cause problems. Linda returned home that evening with a calm smile. She cooked dinner. She played with Miracle. She didn't speak a word to David. But she wasn't done yet. 2 days later, David received a court summons. He was being sued for emotional abandonment and coercive control. Linda claimed he had set a trap for her and was abusing the boy to blackmail her. He was being accused of trying to frame his wife. David held the paper in shock. His hands shook as he read line after line. This wasn't happening, but it was. And as he looked at the final paragraph, request for custody of Miracle by the mother, his knees nearly buckled. She was fighting dirty, and she wasn't done. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, his lawyer called him at 9 p.m. that night. "David, we have a bigger problem." "What now?" Toby's uncle showed up. "He wants to press charges." "What? Against who?" "Against you. He says you coerced his nephew. That you are trying to hide something." David slammed his fist into the wall. "No. No way. This is twisted." They're saying the boy was manipulated, that you're creating false stories to hide your own guilt. The boy has been crying nonstop. He refuses to talk to anyone. David's eyes widened. Something was wrong. Why would Toby lie? Unless Linda had gotten to him. David raced to the hospital early the next morning. But when he got there, the nurse at the front desk looked at him oddly. "Are you Mr. Okafor?" "Yes." "You didn't know?" "No what?" "Toby's family discharged him last night. He's gone." "Gone where?" "We don't know. But they said they were taking him far away for safety." David felt the world spinning. Everything he had gathered, every proof, every truth was disappearing right in front of him. His wife was destroying him piece by piece. And now the boy was gone. David went home that night in silence. He walked into the house and found the living room empty, the dining room empty, the kitchen lights off. He called out, "Miracle?" No answer. "Linda?" Still nothing. He ran upstairs. Bedroom door open. No one inside. A single sheet of paper lay on the pillow. He picked it up with shaking hands. It read, "You left me no choice. I've taken what matters most. Let's see how strong you really are now. What would you do if your betrayer tried to take away your child too? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for what happened next." The storm has just begun. David didn't even realize he had dropped the letter. His fingers were trembling so badly it fluttered to the floor like a leaf. For a long second, he just stood there, frozen, his ears ringing, his mind unable to believe what his eyes had read. Linda had taken Miracle, his daughter, his joy, his only reason to keep breathing, gone. He sprinted downstairs, tearing through the kitchen, the backyard, the gate, screaming her name. "Miracle! Miracle! Where are you?" "Linda!" The gateman's quarters were empty. The backyard was silent. He flung open the gate, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Anything. A dropped shoe, her pink teddy bear, her backpack. Nothing. He called her phone, it was off. He called Linda's, also off. Then he dropped to his knees in the middle of the compound, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. His baby girl was gone. 10 minutes later, he was on the phone with the police, trying to remain calm. They told him he had to wait 24 hours to file a full missing person report unless he had evidence the child was in immediate danger. "I have that," David yelled into the phone. "She left a note. She took my child. She's trying to break me. Please, help me." The officer told him to come to the station with the note and initiate an emergency file. David didn't wait. He was out the door in 5 minutes, carrying the letter and all the documents he had collected so far, audio, video, the court summons, everything. At the station, the officer on duty, a woman named Sergeant Nena, read through the documents, her face growing stiffer with every page. "She took the child without consent," she said firmly. "This is now a case of parental abduction." David felt a spark of hope. "Can we track her?" Sergeant Nena nodded. "We'll do our best. She can't go far without leaving a trace." Back at home, David sat in the now empty living room, surrounded by silence. Every clock tick echoed like thunder. He stared at Miracle's drawings on the wall, her baby doll lying on the sofa, her tiny shoes by the stairs. The quiet was unbearable. His lawyer called. "I just saw the news. They've issued a temporary restraining order against you." David stood up, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "Linda filed a fast-tracked complaint. Claimed you were emotionally abusive and threatened to hurt her and the child. They're using it to stall the abduction case." David's blood went cold. "She's playing the victim?" "Yes. And unfortunately, without the child present to verify her safety or the boy to back your story, it's her word against yours." David's fists clenched. "I won't let her win. She can lie to the court, but she's not going to raise my daughter with that evil in her heart." Later that night, David got a call from an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. It was Toby, but his voice was shaking and scared. "Uncle, I'm sorry," he said softly. "Toby, where are you?" "I can't say. They said if I speak, they'll hurt my mother. I didn't mean for this to happen. Where is Miracle? Did Linda bring her to you? No, but I overheard her saying she'll leave the country. She has help. David's heart stopped. She's going to smuggle my daughter out? I don't know when, but soon. Maybe tomorrow. Please don't tell anyone I called. Please. The line went dead. David stood in the middle of his room, breathing fast. Leave the country? He had to act tonight. He called Sergeant Nena again, and she authorized a trace on Linda's passport. Within 30 minutes, they found an alert. Linda had submitted an emergency travel application through a private agent in Lagos, requesting clearance for herself and a minor. No destination listed. No return date. David jumped into his car and drove straight to the airport. But Linda wasn't there. Instead, he went to the office of the private agent, pretending to be a client. When he spotted Linda's form on the desk through the glass, he burst through the door and grabbed the file. "Sir, you can't do that." He didn't care. The agent recognized David and looked nervous. "Please, sir, it's just paperwork. She said she's traveling for a vacation. With my daughter without my consent?" The man backed off. "I swear I didn't know. She said she was widowed." "Widowed?" David saw red. He left with a copy of the travel document and drove straight to the Ministry of Immigration, where he filed an official blocklist request against Linda's passport and the unauthorized travel of Miracle. By morning, the authorities had launched a full restriction. Linda would not be allowed to fly out. The next morning, Linda returned to the house, as if nothing happened. David met her at the gate. "You thought you were smart, right?" he said coldly. Linda didn't flinch. "I only took what belonged to me. Miracle doesn't belong to you." She raised her chin. "A court will decide that." "Wrong. A judge will." He handed her a fresh legal notice. She opened it, and her face darkened. "Emergency custody hearing?" she whispered. David smiled grimly. "Yes, and this time, I'm bringing everything." The court date came 2 days later. David walked in with his lawyer and 2 police officers by his side. Linda arrived in dark shades and a fake limp, playing the victim card. But David had everything: the video of her and Toby, the audio, the letter, the hospital report, even Toby's anonymous call recording. The courtroom grew silent as the footage played. Gasps filled the room. Linda's mouth quivered. Then the judge looked up. "You seduced a minor. You attempted to flee the country with a child without legal authorization. You fabricated abuse claims. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Linda didn't speak. The judge banged his gavel. "Full temporary custody is granted to the father pending criminal investigation. The mother is hereby restrained from unsupervised contact with the child." David exhaled for the first time in days. Miracle was coming home. He returned that evening to find Miracle already dropped off by police escort. The moment she saw her father, she ran into his arms. He wept. For the first time in a long time, he wept without shame. But just when he thought it was over, he got a call from his lawyer the next morning. "David, you're not going to like this." "What now?" "They're filing for property claim. Linda is saying the house was co-owned and she wants to sell it immediately." David stared at the ceiling, fists clenched. She wasn't done yet. She was coming for everything. What would you do if your ex tried to sell your house out from under you? After all that betrayal? Drop a comment below, and follow the channel to catch what happened next. Because in the next part, she goes too far. David stood at the window, watching the sun rise slowly over the rooftops of Abuja, but all he could feel was a storm inside. His phone was still in his hand from the lawyer's call. Linda was now coming for the house. His house. The one he built with his sweat. The one Miracle called home. He turned and looked around the living room. The couch where his daughter napped on weekends. The walls filled with her hand-drawn art. The staircase she danced down every morning before school. And now Linda wanted to sell it all. As if she hadn't already broken everything that mattered. Later that day, David met with Mr. James Olatunde, his lawyer. "She submitted a claim that the house was co-owned," James said, flipping through documents. She presented a copy of the land registration certificate with her name listed as a co-signer. David blinked. That can't be. I bought this house before we got married. Everything was in my name. James nodded grimly. That's what we thought. But it seems somehow she managed to slip her name into a filing during the 2019 renovation permit. Likely through her cousin at the housing registry. David's stomach dropped. That cousin again. He had been too trusting. She knew what she was doing all along, he whispered. She's been planning this for years, James replied. It's not just revenge anymore. She's trying to erase you completely. David leaned forward. What are our options? We file for fraud. We subpoena her cousin. We bring in your original deed. But it will take time. And meanwhile, if the court approves her claim, she could force a sale. David ran his hands over his face. I just got my daughter back. And now we might lose the roof over our heads? James nodded. Unless we play smarter than her. For the next few days, David stayed 2 steps ahead. He transferred all major assets from joint to private. He froze their shared accounts. He moved Miracle to a different school and arranged a private drop-off routine, away from any of Linda's spies or relatives. But Linda didn't back down. She showed up at the house one afternoon with 2 men and a property agent, claiming she had rights to inspect her share. David refused to let them in. She called the police. It became a standoff at the gate. Neighbors watching through curtains, guards pretending not to look. David showed the police his court-granted temporary sole custody and property injunction. Linda screamed. He forged it. He's lying. This is my house too. The officer remained calm. Ma, you are not permitted to enter this property until the ownership case is resolved. She lunged toward David, eyes wild. You can take my name off the documents, but you can't take the blood off your hands. David didn't respond. He just stared at her with the stillness of a man whose pain had run too deep to show. That night, Miracle asked, Daddy, why is Mummy angry all the time? David knelt beside her. Because when people do bad things and get caught, they don't like the truth. Is Mummy a bad person? David swallowed. She made very bad choices, but it's not your fault. You're safe now, and that's all that matters. She hugged him tightly. He didn't let go for a long time. The next morning, David received a letter that made his heart skip a beat. Linda had filed for an emergency mental health evaluation, claiming David was emotionally unstable and unsafe for a minor. It was a strategy. If the court believed him unfit to parent, she could regain custody. His hands shook as he showed the document to James. She's playing dirty, James muttered. She wants to trigger a family investigation. If they find anything, they'll use it against you. I have nothing to hide. True, but it's not about hiding. It's about perception. David stood up, angry. She was kissing a 16-year-old boy. She tried to disappear with my daughter. She forged property claims. Why is she the one pushing me to the edge? James stared at him with a calm that only years of court battles could teach. Because desperate people make dangerous moves. And when they're losing, they'll try to burn down everything around them. A week later, David was summoned for a psychological evaluation. He went in calmly, answered every question honestly, and cooperated fully. The psychologist seemed satisfied, even impressed by his composure under pressure. But something else was bothering David. Toby hadn't been seen since the night he called. He had vanished, and Linda wasn't saying a word. So David hired a private investigator. Within days, the PI came back with a shocking update. I tracked them through phone tower pings, the PI said, laying out a map. Linda has been sending money to a village outside Benin City. A small compound owned by a man named Emeka. David leaned in. Who's Emeka? Former pastor. Rumored to be involved in underground deliverance rituals. He's taken in troubled teens before. Guess who's with him? David's eyes narrowed. Toby. The PI nodded. And from what we heard, they're preparing him to testify against you. They're planning to say you groomed him, that you abused both of them. David felt like the air had been sucked from the room. "They're going to flip the story," he whispered. "They're trying to." David stood up slowly. "Then we end it now." He and the PI made a plan to visit the compound under the guise of charity workers. They arrived with a van full of clothing and food supplies. Emeka welcomed them at first, until he noticed David staring too hard. "You look familiar," Emeka said. "I get that a lot," David replied. Then, as they were handing out clothes to the teens, David saw him. Toby, thinner, nervous, but still recognizable. "Toby," he called. The boy froze. Emeka stepped forward. "He doesn't talk to strangers." But David kept his gaze steady. "Toby, it's me, Uncle David. You remember me?" Toby looked down, tears welling in his eyes. David stepped closer. "You're not safe here, son. They're using you. You know the truth. And if you don't speak it, you'll be stuck in their lies forever." For a moment, Toby just stood there. Then he dropped the sweater he was holding and ran straight into the compound. The guards moved. David and the PI ran too. But it was too late. The gate slammed shut. David stood outside the compound wall, breathing hard. From inside he heard shouting. Then silence. Then a gunshot. Was that warning shot meant for David? Or did someone just go too far? Comment below what you think really happened. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the village like thunder after dry lightning. David froze. He and the private investigator stood outside the gate, eyes wide, breathing hard. Chickens scattered nearby, and a few curious villagers peeked from behind their doors, drawn by the noise. But no one said a word. Then silence. A long, chilling silence. David's fists tightened. "That shot. Was it for us?" The PI shook his head slowly, lips pressed together. "I don't think so. That came from inside." David's heart dropped. "Toby." Without thinking, he ran to the gate and started pounding. "Toby! Toby, are you okay?" No answer. "Open this gate. Somebody open this damn gate." Still no answer. Finally, an older woman stepped out of the compound from a side entrance and closed the door behind her. She approached slowly, wringing her hands. "Sir, you need to go." David turned sharply. "Where's the boy?" The woman looked down. "They said you brought darkness here. You should not have come." "What happened in there?" David demanded, voice shaking. She hesitated. Then she whispered. "The boy tried to run. The gun was to scare him. But he's hurt. I don't know how badly." David's breath caught. That was it. The tipping point. No more legal games. No more quiet waiting. This had just turned into something far worse than betrayal or revenge. Now, a child was in danger, and it was his nephew. David turned to the PI. "Call the police. Call child protection. I want this compound stormed." The PI nodded and made the call instantly. 2 hours later, David was standing in front of the same gate, this time with a convoy of officers from the Edo State Police Department. They didn't wait for permission. They broke the gate open. What they found inside stunned even the officers. Dozens of children, mostly teens, lived there in tight, filthy quarters. Many looked weak, hungry, scared. Some were praying in corners. Others froze at the sight of uniforms. But there was no sign of Toby. David stormed room after room, until finally, in the back of a dim corridor, he found him. The boy was on the floor, curled in a fetal position, his head bleeding slightly from a gash near his hairline. His shirt was torn. His eyes were swollen. "Toby!" David shouted, rushing over. The boy looked up. "Uncle!" he croaked. David dropped to his knees, pulling him into an embrace. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." Toby sobbed against his chest, shaking like a leaf. The officers arrested Emeka and his assistants on the spot. Human trafficking, abuse of minors, illegal confinement. As they led Emeka away, he shouted, "He was never supposed to come back. She said he was the problem. I was only doing what she asked." David turned sharply. "She who?" But Emeka just laughed. "You'll see. She's not done yet." Later that night, David sat beside Toby's hospital bed. The boy was stable, but sedated for rest. Doctors said the injuries were minor, but the psychological trauma was severe. David didn't sleep. He watched the machines beep. He watched Toby's chest rise and fall. And then he picked up his phone. He had one last thing to do. The next morning, he met with Sergeant Nena at the police station and handed her a file. A full printed record of Linda's activity. The stolen property claims, the attempted child abduction, the forged mental health filing, and now Toby's confinement through her connection with Emeka. "She's behind all of it," David said. "Every move, every lie, every threat. And she almost got this boy killed." Sergeant Nena looked up. "Then let's bring her in." An arrest warrant was issued for Linda that afternoon. But when officers went to her listed residence, she was gone. Disappeared. No suitcases. No phones. No trace. Her cousin at the registry denied contact. Her friend at the legal office hadn't seen her in a week. Even Miracle's old school hadn't heard from her. Linda had vanished. And no one knew where. For a few days it seemed like the storm had passed. David kept Miracle close, hired a therapist for Toby, strengthened his home security. Slowly, peace began to creep back in. But on a Wednesday morning, just as he was preparing for work, Miracle came running down the stairs holding his phone. "Daddy, there's a video of Mummy." David's heart dropped. He grabbed the phone and opened the message. It was from an unknown number. The video started with shaky footage, clearly filmed in secret. It showed Linda sitting in what looked like a foreign airport lounge. She wore sunglasses and a scarf. She looked straight into the camera and said, "David, if you're watching this, then you know by now you didn't win. You never win. I'm just getting started. You thought you could ruin me? Humiliate me?" She leaned in closer. "I'm going to destroy you, and I'll do it from far away." Then the video ended. No timestamp, no location tag, no audio beyond her voice. Just one final message attached. "Check your bank account." David opened his banking app instantly, and then his hands went cold. Every account was empty. She ran. She stole. And now she's taunting him. What would you do if your ex wiped out your entire account before vanishing? Hit the comments and subscribe because in next chapter, David starts fighting back. And this time it's personal. David dropped the phone. It clattered against the marble floor, but he didn't even flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the banking app still open on the screen. Balance: 0 Nigerian Nairas. Balance: 0 Nigerian Nairas. Balance: 2.14 Nigerian Nairas. All his accounts cleaned out. He stumbled back into the chair like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. Linda hadn't just threatened him. She'd destroyed him. 10 minutes later, he was at the bank. The branch manager, a man named Mr. Okonkwo, wore a permanent frown as he scrolled through David's statements on a secure screen. "Multiple withdrawals," he muttered. "All authorized using your mobile token." "I didn't authorize anything," David snapped. "She cloned my access." Mr. Okonkwo shook his head. "It wasn't cloned, sir. All the authorizations used fingerprint ID yours." David's face went white. He remembered, months ago, Linda had once convinced him to let her use his phone to transfer money for groceries. She must have scanned her fingerprint into the device then, and never removed it. She had been planning this for longer than he realized. "Sir, the last major withdrawal," the banker continued, "was sent to a cryptocurrency wallet. Anonymous. Untraceable." David's jaw clenched. "How much?" Mr. Okonkwo turned the screen. David stared. 117,800,000 Nigerian Nairas. Over 117 million Naira. Nearly his entire savings and investment account. Gone. He left the bank feeling like a ghost. By evening, he'd filed reports with EFCC, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the Nigerian Interpol Division, and reopened the case with the police. But they all said the same thing: "We'll do our best." He already knew what that meant. She had a head start, and with that kind of money, she could hide anywhere. That night, he sat in the living room with Miracle asleep on the couch beside him, and Toby upstairs with a caregiver. The house was quiet. Too quiet. David stared into the dark. For a long time he didn't move. Then finally he stood, walked to the safe, opened it, and pulled out the last item he had left from before all this madness began. A dusty envelope labeled Plan B. Inside was a contact card. He picked up his phone and dialed. After 2 rings, a voice answered. "Long time, Mr. Okafor." David didn't waste time. "I need your help." The man on the other end chuckled. "I take it this is about a woman." David's voice turned cold. "She stole everything. She ran. But I want her found. I want her stopped. I don't care how far she's gone. Payment. She has my money. I assume you want her alive?" David paused. "Just ruined." 2 days later, the call came in. "Mr. Okafor, we found her." David gripped the phone tightly. "Where?" "She's in South Africa, Cape Town, living under a fake name, Marion Peters, renting a luxury penthouse, flashing money like it fell from heaven." David's voice was tight. "Does she have the child?" "No. Alone. But she's not hiding anymore. She's shopping, hosting, laughing." David's knuckles whitened. "Can you get to her?" "We already did. But we didn't touch her. We followed her. We've recorded her entering a private bank with forged IDs. We've tracked her spending. Now we just need a green light." David took a breath and nodded slowly. "Burn her whole world down." By the next morning, international alerts were filed. South African authorities were contacted. David's team submitted full digital proof of identity theft, fraud, and international money laundering. Then they hit her bank account directly, using the same cyberforensic team she'd unknowingly been traced by. By the time Linda tried to withdraw money that Friday afternoon, her card declined. Then her backup card declined. Then her apartment keycard stopped working. Cameras caught her screaming in the lobby, demanding answers. The building staff shrugged, saying her rent had defaulted. In 24 hours, she was on the street. And the moment she stepped outside the building to hail a taxi, Interpol agents surrounded her. She screamed. She spat. She called David's name. But it was over. Back in Nigeria, David got the call. "We got her." He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just walked over to Miracle, who was coloring on the floor, and said, "Baby, we're safe now." She looked up. "Did Mummy call?" He hesitated. "Not today." Miracle smiled faintly and went back to her crayons. But the final blow wasn't Linda's arrest. Came a week later, in court. Standing in front of the judge, Linda looked like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her designer clothes were gone. Her voice shaky. She faced charges of theft, abuse, kidnapping, forgery, and attempted evasion. David sat calmly in the front row. And when it was finally his turn to speak, he stood. "My lord, I have nothing else to say except this. I loved her. I trusted her. I forgave her more than she ever deserved. But some people, if you give them the knife, they won't just cut bread. They'll cut you with it." The courtroom fell silent. Linda bowed her head, and the judge passed sentence. She would face 10 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 7. Her citizenship request in South Africa was revoked. Her assets seized. And all funds traced to her crypto account were to be returned to David in monthly installments over the next 5 years. As David walked out of the courthouse, the wind brushed against his face like a breath of freedom. This battle was finally over. But the scars? They'd take longer to heal. The villain fell. But is David truly free? In next chapter, he faces something more dangerous than betrayal. Temptation for revenge. Like, comment, and subscribe for what might be the most shocking twist yet. A week after Linda's sentencing, David stood on his balcony overlooking the city skyline, the cool Abuja evening breeze brushing against his skin. He had his money back. Part of it. His daughter was safe. His enemy was behind bars. But he felt nothing. No joy. No relief. Just a deep, cold void where trust used to live. They say justice brings peace. But sometimes, it only leaves a man with more questions. David was invited to a business recovery seminar downtown. It was hosted by former victims of financial betrayal, CEOs, entrepreneurs, even a retired senator whose own son had stolen millions from his account. David didn't plan to speak, but when they called his name, the room went silent. He stepped to the front, took the mic, and looked at the crowd. "I used to think betrayal was a moment," he said. "One big, terrible event. But I've learned it's actually many small cuts, disguised as love, as kindness, as trust." He paused. "My wife didn't just cheat on me. She didn't just steal from me. She weaponized everything I gave her. And the worst part? I still wonder where I went wrong." There was a long silence. Then applause. Not wild, but slow and respectful. The kind that meant, "We feel you." ChatGPT said, Chapter 7. A week after Linda's sentencing, David stood on his balcony overlooking the city skyline, the cool Abuja evening breeze brushing against his skin. He had his money back. Part of it. His daughter was safe. His enemy was behind bars. But he felt nothing. No joy. No relief. Just a deep, cold void where trust used to live. They say justice brings peace. But sometimes, it only leaves a man with more questions. David was invited to a business recovery seminar downtown. It was hosted by former victims of financial betrayal, CEOs, entrepreneurs, even a retired senator whose own son had stolen millions from his account. David didn't plan to speak, but when they called his name, the room went silent. He stepped to the front, took the mic, and looked at the crowd. "I used to think betrayal was a moment," he said. "One big, terrible event. But I've learned it's actually many small cuts, disguised as love, as kindness, as trust." He paused. "My wife didn't just cheat on me. She didn't just steal from me. She weaponized everything I gave her. And the worst part? I still wonder where I went wrong." There was a long silence. Then applause. Not wild, but slow and respectful. The kind that meant, "We feel you." After the event, a woman approached him in the lobby. Her name was Angela. She wore a simple Ankara dress, soft makeup, and a calm smile. "I was moved by your words," she said. "I went through something similar." David nodded politely. "I run a foundation for men who've survived domestic manipulation and false accusations," she added. "If you ever want to talk, or help, here's my card." He took it, not ready to talk, but somehow grateful. Angela didn't press. She just smiled and walked away. The next day, David received a strange envelope at his office. There was no return name, just one photo inside, of Miracle, the school. On the back, scribbled in blue ink, "Not everyone thinks you're the hero." He dropped the photo. His eyes scanned the office. The door, the windows. Was someone watching them? He immediately called the police. They came, took the photo, promised to look into it. But something about the handwriting felt familiar. Too familiar. Later that night, he sat with Toby at home. The boy had improved, physically at least. The cuts had healed. But his eyes still carried fear. "Uncle," he said quietly, "I think someone else is involved." David frowned. "What do you mean?" Toby swallowed hard. "When I was in that compound, Emeka kept mentioning someone named Victor. He said Victor gave the money. Not Linda. Victor. Yes, and I think he knew you." David's heart skipped. "Did he say anything else?" Toby nodded. "He said, Victor is going to finish what Linda couldn't." David stood slowly. That name, Victor Owolabi, a former business partner from years ago. They had started a real estate firm together before David pulled out over shady deals. Victor had lost money, lost face. And now, was he the one pulling strings all along? David went to his private investigator again. Find Victor. It didn't take long. Victor had moved abroad for years, but was recently back in Lagos, running a low-profile crypto firm. Very low profile, but quietly powerful. And he had once dated Linda before she married David. The web was wider than he thought. That night, David sat in the dark, staring at the wall. Victor. Had Linda just been the weapon? Was this bigger than cheating? Bigger than betrayal? Was it a revenge plot from the very beginning? The next day, A black SUV followed David from his daughter's school. He noticed it too late. He tried to shake it off in traffic, but the driver matched every turn. Just as he reached his compound gate, the SUV pulled up beside him. The tinted window rolled down. Victor, clean-shaven, calm, smiling. "David," he said. "Long time." David gripped the steering wheel. "What do you want?" Victor shrugged. "I just wanted you to know. Linda was never the mastermind. She was the trigger. I was the hand holding the gun." David's blood ran cold. Victor leaned closer. "And this isn't over." Then the SUV sped away, leaving behind the echo of war. What if the woman who betrayed you was just the beginning? Coming next is secrets are revealed that will change everything. Drop your thoughts below. Like, comment, and stay tuned because Victor just opened the next chapter of destruction. David didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands clenched, Victor's words looping in his head like a haunting song. Linda was never the mastermind. She was the trigger. I was the hand holding the gun. It all made sense now. The sudden collapse of his old company. The anonymous business smear articles. The financial investigation 3 years ago that nearly ruined his reputation. The betrayal. The theft. The lies. Victor had been orchestrating every beat in the background. And Linda? She'd just been the perfect pawn. Victor just made the biggest mistake of all, threatening David's child. Next chapter. David unleashes the final phase of his plan. Comment what you would do if your enemy crossed the line. Subscribe. David didn't go home. He couldn't. Not after the threat. Not after that voice. He drove aimlessly through the city for hours, his mind on fire. The rain had started to fall. Slow at first, then heavier, pounding the windshield like war drums. The world outside blurred, but his thoughts were razor sharp. Victor had drawn the final line. He didn't just want David ruined. He wanted him broken. But this time, Victor had miscalculated. Because a man who has nothing left to lose is a dangerous man. The next morning, David met with Angela at a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town. She already knew what happened. She had seen the video, read the comments, felt the shift. "You ready?" she asked softly. David nodded. "It ends now. No more delays." Angela handed him a thick folder. "Then here's everything. Victor's offshore routing numbers, shell company names, his fake identity in Kenya, the house in Cape Town registered under a former driver's name. He's been careful, but not careful enough." David flipped through it all. "Why help me this much?" he asked. Angela smiled faintly. "Because I've been chasing Victor for 5 years. You're the only one who got this close. Step 1. Take away his power." David met with EFCC agents and delivered the evidence. This time, they didn't just nod. They acted. Within 24 hours, Victor's crypto exchange licenses were suspended. Bank accounts flagged. Shell companies frozen. Suddenly, Victor couldn't move money. He was bleeding without being touched. Step 2. Make the people speak. David released more footage, this time showing Victor's visit to Linda in prison, recorded secretly by Angela's contacts. In the video, Linda says, "You said you'd protect me. You said you'd fix everything." Victor's reply, "You were only useful as long as you kept him distracted." That clip hit social media like wildfire. Now the crowd turned again. The villain was clear. Hashtag Victor exposed. Hashtag he planned everything. Hashtag protect the innocent. David didn't post anything else. He didn't need to. The people were speaking for him now. Step 3. Strike the heart. Victor had one final hidden vault, a mansion in Banana Island, Lagos. It was his last known residence in Nigeria. David sent the address to the authorities. Then he drove there himself. He had to see it. He had to end it. As he pulled up outside the gates, he saw black SUVs surrounding the compound. Armed EFCC agents were on standby. They had a warrant approved overnight. Victor was inside. They kicked down the doors. David stayed back, watching from the shadows. He heard the shouting, the scuffle. Then finally, Victor was dragged out in cuffs, still in a designer robe. still smirking, but this time with swollen eyes and no exit. You really thought this would break me? Victor sneered as he was pushed into the van. David stepped forward. No, he said quietly. I thought it would finish you. Victor laughed bitterly. I still have people. You can't erase me. David stared at him coldly. You already erased yourself. That night, David returned to the safe house. Miracle saw him through the window and ran to the door. Daddy! He scooped her up in his arms and held her tight. The longest hug yet. You're safe now, he whispered into her hair. Forever. The next morning, David was invited back onto the very talk show that once aired Linda's fake abuse claims. This time, they gave him the opening slot. He sat down, cameras rolling. I didn't ask for this war, he said. But when it came, I didn't hide. I fought with truth. And in a world of lies, truth is the sharpest weapon. The host asked, what would you say to people watching? People going through betrayal? David paused, then answered, don't fight like the one who hurt you. Fight like the one you are. With honor. With proof. With fire when necessary, but never with poison. Victor faced multiple charges. Financial crime, international laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, cyber manipulation, and criminal threat. He would never walk free again. But David had no need to celebrate. He had peace, and peace was more powerful than revenge. As he stood outside Miracle's new school on Monday morning, this time walking her in proudly, he realized the storm had passed. Not without scars, but with strength. Betrayal, war, justice. But before we say goodbye, there's still one twist left. In this last chapter, someone from the past returns with a shocking secret. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the final chapter is not what you expect. David stood on the veranda, watching the orange Abuja sun dip below the skyline, painting the rooftops with gold. The air was calm, unusually peaceful, like the universe was finally giving him a chance to breathe. Victor was gone. Linda was behind bars. Miracle was back in school. Toby had started therapy and was slowly coming back to life. David should have felt whole. But something still tugged at him, a quiet ache in the back of his heart. It was the feeling of unfinished business. He didn't know what, but something still wasn't right. That uneasy answer came just 3 days later. David was at his office, reviewing final legal documents to recover full ownership of his property and assets. The receptionist walked in with a puzzled expression. Sir, someone's here to see you. Says it's urgent. David frowned. Who is it? The receptionist hesitated. A woman. Said her name is Evelyn Owolabi. The surname struck him like a slap. Owolabi? Victor's family? Send her in, David said carefully. Moments later, the door opened, and in walked a tall, graceful woman in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a quiet fire in her movements. She held a leather folder close to her chest like it carried something fragile. Mr. David Okafor, she said softly. Yes, I'm Victor's older sister. David stood up, cautious. If you're here to defend your brother. No, she interrupted, her voice firm. I'm here to apologize. And to warn you. He blinked. Evelyn sat down slowly. My brother wasn't just corrupted. He was obsessed. Obsessed with destroying the people who reminded him of what he could never be. She opened the folder. Inside were letters, dozens, all handwritten by Victor over the past 5 years. Rants, rage, plots, names, obsession with David's success, with his marriage, with owning Linda before David ever married her. David scanned through them, his heart pounding. You're telling me this began before I ever married Linda? Evelyn nodded. He targeted you. He planted her. She didn't come into your life by accident. They met at a party I hosted. He dared her to get close to you. David's knees nearly gave out. It had all been a game. The marriage, the child, the love, a long con. Evelyn continued, tears rising in her eyes. But Linda, she fell for you. That wasn't part of the plan. And that's why it all fell apart. Victor never forgave her. That's when things got twisted. David leaned forward, staring at the folder. "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because he called me from prison yesterday," she said. "And he wasn't done." David stiffened. "He threatened me again?" "No," he said. "There's another person involved. A silent partner. Someone still outside. Someone who has access to your daughter's school records. Your bank. Your legal files." David's skin went cold. He remembered the anonymous video, the photos, the voice on the phone. "I thought that was Victor." Evelyn shook her head. "He said he left someone else in place. Someone closer than you think." David didn't waste time. He called Angela. He called EFCC. He called Toby's caregiver. He called the school principal. He activated every alert, every contact, every trace. And that night, the call came. Private number. This time he answered calmly. The voice wasn't Victor's. It was soft, female, cold. "We never needed Victor," she said. "You think prison stops us? You think she's safe forever?" David didn't speak. He listened. He recorded. The voice laughed once. "You're playing chess. We're playing generations." Then the line cut. 2 hours later, EFCC traced the call to an unregistered SIM card, used in a hotel just 4 kilometers from Miracle School. The woman had been watching. David sped to the hotel with the police, but the room was empty. Clean. The bed still made. But on the table sat a single photograph. Miracle, holding her father's hand. A single red X marked across David's face. By morning, David had relocated again, this time under full federal surveillance. Miracle was safe. But now it was clear. Victor's empire hadn't died. It had gone quiet. But it was still watching. Still waiting. 1 week later, the judge officially transferred sole, permanent custody of Miracle to David. Linda was stripped of all parental rights. Toby was cleared of all charges and registered in a private school with a scholarship. David stood in court holding Miracle's hand. But he didn't smile, because he knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. This was survival. At home that night, David sat down at his desk. He opened a fresh file folder, labeled it, "If They Ever Return." Inside, he began compiling names, threats, voices, accounts, partners, emails, and faces. This time, he wouldn't wait for betrayal. He'd be ready. Miracle came in quietly, curling up on his lap. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Are we okay now?" David looked down at her. Her innocence, her hope, her whole future resting in his hands. "Yes, baby," he said softly. "We are." But in his heart, he knew the truth. Some betrayals never really end. The end. Clapperboard, thank you for watching this wonderful African betrayal and redemption story. If you made it this far, drop a red heart in the comments to show David he didn't fight alone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More real, emotional stories coming soon. Would you trust again? After everything?